The deep space research vessel Horizon's Edge floated silently through the dark emptiness between stars. It was a large ship, built to carry 60 crew members on long missions far from Earth. For 3 weeks now, the ship had been orbiting a cold, rocky moon called Seven. The crew collected samples from the surface and studied the strange landscape below. Everything had been normal and boring until that night. Was the chief security officer on the ship. He was a tall man with short gray hair and sharp eyes that never seemed to miss anything. He had spent 20 years in the military before joining the space program, and he took his job very seriously. That night, he sat alone in the security room, watching the many screens that showed different parts of the ship. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. On the screen showing Cargo Deck 3, he saw a small flash of heat appear and then vanish. The thermal cameras on the ship could detect body heat, and something warm had moved through that hallway. Leaned forward and watched more carefully. A minute later, he saw it again. This time there were more flashes. He counted 6 small heat signatures moving together in a tight group. Touched the controls and tried to zoom in, but the shapes were already gone. He switched to another camera and saw nothing. Then, on a different screen showing Cargo Deck 4, the shapes appeared again. 6 small heat signatures, moving together, always staying close to one another. They moved like ghosts, appearing for just a few seconds before fading away. He reached for his communicator and called the bridge. "Captain Cole, we have a situation. I need you to come to the security room right away." Captain Cole was a woman in her early 50s with short brown hair and a face that showed years of hard decisions. She had commanded the Horizon's Edge for 5 years, and her crew respected her deeply. She arrived at the security room within minutes, still holding a cup of coffee that she had not finished. "What do you have?" she asked, standing beside his chair. He pointed at the screens. "Watch Deck 7, near the engineering access corridor." They waited in silence. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Just when the captain was about to speak, the heat signatures appeared. 6 small shapes, glowing orange on the thermal display, moved across the corridor in perfect formation. They stayed close together, never spreading out, never breaking their pattern. Then, just as quickly as they appeared, they vanished. "What am I looking at?" Captain Cole asked, her voice tight. "I don't know," admitted. "They've been appearing for the past hour, always 6 of them, always moving together. Every time I send a camera drone to investigate, they disappear before it arrives. Whatever these things are, they know we're watching." The captain set down her coffee cup. "Wake up the senior staff. I want everyone in the briefing room in 15 minutes." The briefing room was small and functional, with a round table and a holographic display in the center. The senior officers gathered quickly, most of them still looking tired from being woken up in the middle of the night cycle. Price, the young sensor technician, had brought his portable data pad and was already analyzing the recordings. Doctor, the ship's, sat with her arms crossed, her dark eyes focused on the holographic replay of the heat signatures. 6 distinct thermal readings, reported, his fingers moving across his data pad. They generate about the same heat as a small mammal, maybe 20 to 30 pounds each, but here's the strange part. They move in perfect synchronization. Watch this. He slowed down the replay. "See how they all take a step at the exact same moment. It's like they're connected somehow, or trained to move together." "Could they be robots?" asked Lieutenant Commander Victor Hayes, the ship's pilot. He was a large man with a friendly face, but right now he looked worried. "Some kind of surveillance drones." "The heat signature is wrong for machines," said, shaking her head. "These readings suggest biological organisms, living creatures." "Living creatures that got onto my ship somehow," Captain Cole said grimly. "The question is how and what do they want?" Pulled up a map of the ship on the holographic display. Red dots showed every location where the heat signatures had appeared over the past hour. "They're concentrated in the lower decks, mostly around cargo and engineering. They haven't gone near crew quarters or the bridge, at least not yet." "Maybe they're looking for something," suggested. Food, water, a place to hide. If they came from the moon's surface, they might be confused and scared. Or hunting, countered. We don't know anything about these creatures. For all we know, they could be predators, studying our movements before they attack. The room went quiet. Everyone knew that alien encounters were rare and often dangerous. The universe was full of life, but most of it did not care about human safety. Captain Cole stood up and placed her hands flat on the table. Until we know what we're dealing with, I'm implementing full security protocols. All non-essential personnel will remain in their quarters. Security teams will patrol in pairs, and no one goes anywhere alone. I want sensors running at maximum sensitivity. Review everything we know about Seven's ecosystem. If these things came from the surface, maybe we can figure out what they are. She looked around the room at her officers. I want these creatures found and contained. Whatever they are, they don't belong on this ship, and I won't have my crew living in fear. Questions? No one spoke. Good, get to work. As the officers filed out of the briefing room, walked quickly toward the engineering section. She was a quiet woman of 32, with practical brown hair and hands that were always stained with grease or machine oil. She had been the ship's senior engineer for 2 years, and she knew every pipe, wire, and circuit on the horizon's edge. No one noticed the slight worry in her eyes as she passed through the corridors. No one saw how she glanced over her shoulder every few steps, checking the shadows behind her. And no one knew that deep in her pocket, she carried a small device that she had built herself. A device that was currently making it very hard for the ship's sensors to get a clear reading on certain small, warm bodies that were never far from her side. Reached the engineering deck and stepped through the heavy door. The room was filled with the hum of machines and the soft glow of control panels. She walked past rows of equipment to a small storage closet in the back corner. After checking to make sure no one was watching, she opened the door and slipped inside. In the darkness of the closet, 6 pairs of large, glowing eyes looked up at her. 6 small bodies pressed close together, their fur shifting colors as they tried to blend into the shadows. When they saw, they made soft chirping sounds, like baby birds calling for their mother. Knelt down and reached into her bag, pulling out packets of synthesized protein paste. "Little ones," she whispered, her voice gentle. "You have to stay quiet. Everyone is looking for you now, and I need to figure out what to do." One by one, the creatures came forward to eat from her hands. Their fur was soft and warm, and despite the fear in her heart, could not help but smile as they pushed against her fingers, eager for food and comfort. She had found them 5 days ago on the surface of Seven. Their mother had been dead, crushed under fallen rocks, and the 6 cubs had been huddled around her body, crying in their strange little voices. Had tried to walk away. She had told herself that it was not her problem, that bringing alien onto the ship was against every rule in the book. But she could not do it. She could not leave 6 helpless bobbies alone to die on a frozen moon. Now she sat in a dark closet, feeding alien cubs while the entire ship hunted for them, and she had no idea how this story would end. "I'll protect you," she promised them quietly. "I don't know how yet, but I'll find a way." The cubs finished eating and formed their little line behind her, just as they always did. Took a deep breath and opened the closet door, ready to face whatever came next. The next 2 days on the horizon's edge were filled with fear and confusion. The crew walked through the corridors with nervous eyes, looking over their shoulders at every sound. Security teams marched back and forth in pairs, carrying scanners and emergency weapons. Sleep became difficult for everyone. The ship that had once felt like home now felt like a place where danger hid in every shadow. Worked without rest, coordinating search teams and studying sensor data. He divided the ship into 12 sectors and assigned teams to sweep each one systematically. They used thermal cameras, motion detectors, and sound amplifiers. They checked every storage room, every maintenance tunnel, every air vent. But no matter how hard they searched, The phantom signatures continued to appear and disappear like ghosts. "They're smarter than us," admitted during the morning briefing. Dark circles had formed under his eyes from lack of sleep. "Every time we move a team to Sector 5, the signatures show up in Sector 8. When we rush to Sector 8, they appear in Sector 2. It's like they know exactly where we are and exactly how to avoid us." Captain Cole listened with growing frustration. Could they be accessing our communications somehow, reading our patrol schedules? Price shook his head. "I've checked our systems 3 times. There's no sign of any intrusion or hacking. These creatures are just very good at hiding." Doctor had been quiet during most of the meeting, her eyes focused on her data pad. Now she looked up with a thoughtful expression. "I've been analyzing the movement patterns more carefully. There's something we missed." She stood up and connected her data pad to the holographic display. A map of the ship appeared, covered with hundreds of small red dots showing where the heat signatures had been detected over the past 48 hours. "At first glance, the movement looks random," explained. "But when I filtered the data by time and location, a clear pattern emerged. Watch." She pressed a button and the dots began to move, showing the path of the signatures over time. The room fell silent as everyone watched. The red dots moved through the lower decks, sometimes appearing in cargo areas, sometimes in engineering corridors. But they always seemed to follow the same general route. "Now watch what happens when I add this data layer," said. She pressed another button and a blue line appeared on the map, tracing a different path through the ship. Leaned forward. "What's the blue line?" "That's the movement pattern of senior engineer over the same time period," replied. "Her work takes her through most of the lower decks during her shifts. Notice anything?" Everyone stared at the display. The red dots followed the blue line almost exactly. Wherever went, the phantom signatures appeared nearby. When she moved to a new location, they moved too. When she stayed in one place for a long time, the signatures clustered close by. "They're following her," Captain Cole said slowly. "Why would they be following?" "I don't know," admitted. "But this can't be a coincidence. Whatever these creatures are, they have formed some kind of attachment to our engineer." Victor Hayes frowned. "Maybe they're targeting her, using her as a way to learn about the ship before they attack." "Or maybe she knows something she hasn't told us," said, his voice hard. "I want to bring her in for questioning." Captain Cole held up her hand. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Has been a trusted member of this crew for 2 years. Before we accuse her of anything, I want more information." She turned to, "Doctor, I want you to talk to her, privately. Find out if she noticed anything unusual during the surface expedition last week." Nodded. "I'll do it today." While the senior officers made their plans, worked alone in the main engineering room. She checked power readings, adjusted cooling systems, and repaired a small problem with the water recycling unit. To anyone watching, she looked calm and focused, just doing her job like any other day. But inside, her heart was racing. She had heard the rumors spreading through the crew. People were scared. Some were even talking about alien monsters that wanted to kill them all. Every time someone mentioned the invisible Stalkers, felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew the truth. The creatures were not monsters. They were Bobbies, orphaned and alone, following the only source of warmth and kindness they had found since losing their mother. They were scared too, hiding in the shadows of an alien ship, surrounded by strange sounds and smells. All they wanted was to stay close to the human who fed them and spoke to them gently. Thought about going to the captain and telling her everything. She had thought about it 100 times over the past 5 days, but every time she imagined the conversation, she saw the same ending. The cubs would be taken away. They would be locked in a laboratory for study. They would be poked and prodded and treated like specimens instead of living creatures who had already lost everything. She could not let that happen. Not yet. Not until she found a way to make sure they would be safe. Her communicator beeped. A message appeared on the screen. Engineer, please report to Xenobiology Lab 2 at 1400 hours. Doctor would like to speak with you. His hand stopped moving. She stared at the message for a long moment. Doctor was smart. If anyone on the ship could figure out what was happening, it was her. Had been careful, but maybe not careful enough. She took a deep breath and sent a reply. Confirmed, I will be there. At 1400 hours exactly, entered the Xenobiology lab. It was a clean, bright room filled with specimen containers and analysis equipment. Doctor sat at a desk near the window, looking out at the stars. She turned when entered and gave her a warm smile. Thanks for coming, please sit down. Lowered herself into a chair across from the doctor. Is something wrong? I heard there was a problem with some samples from the surface. No, all the samples are fine, said. She studied his face carefully. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about the surface expedition itself. The one from last week, when your team collected rock samples from the Eastern Cave system. What about it? Pulled out her data pad and scrolled through some notes. According to the mission log, you separated from your team for approximately 30 minutes. Your communicator signal showed you were about 2 kilometers from the rest of the group. Can you tell me what happened? Had prepared for this question, she kept her voice steady. I got turned around in the fog. The terrain all looked the same and I lost sight of the others. I wandered for a while before finding my way back. That must have been frightening, said gently. Being alone on an alien moon surrounded by fog. Did you see anything while you were separated? Any signs of life? For a moment said nothing. She looked its kind face at the genuine concern in her eyes. Doctor was not trying to trap her. She was not looking for someone to blame. She just wanted to understand. Made a decision. Maybe it was time to trust someone. I found something, she said quietly. In a cave near some fallen rocks I found creatures. Small ones about the size of cats. There were 6 of them. Sat forward, her eyes wide. You found the heat signatures. You know what they are. They're bobbies, said, and suddenly the words came pouring out like water from a broken dam. Their mother was dead, crushed under rocks. The bobbies were just sitting there next to her body making these sad little sounds. I tried to walk away. I knew the rules, but I couldn't leave them there to die, so I brought them back to the ship. Listened in stunned silence as told her everything. The hidden closet, the smuggled food, the device she had built to blur the thermal sensors, the way the cubs followed her everywhere, walking in their perfect little line, trusting her completely. When finished speaking, she was crying. I know I broke every rule in the book. I know I should have reported it immediately. But they're just bobbies. They were alone and scared and they needed help. What was I supposed to do? What would you have done? Reached across the table and took's hand. I would have done the exact same thing, she said softly. Now dry your eyes and take me to see them. I think it's time I met these invisible stalkers for myself. Led Doctor through the lower corridors of the ship, her heart beating fast in her chest. They walked past storage rooms and equipment lockers, moving deeper into the sections of the vessel where few crew members ever went. The lights were dimmer here, and the hum of the engines was louder. I keep them in a maintenance closet near the secondary power junction, explained as they walked. It's warm there because of the pipes, and hardly anyone comes to this part of the ship. Nodded, her scientific mind already working through dozens of questions. How do they survive without water? What do they eat? Have they shown any signs of illness? I bring them water from the recycling station, said, and they seem to like the protein paste we use for emergency rations. I was worried at first, but they eat it without any problems. She paused at a heavy door and punched in a code. They sleep a lot, huddled together in a pile. When they're awake, they just want to follow me around. The door slid open and led into a narrow corridor lined with pipes and electrical cables. At the far end was a small door marked Storage B7. Stopped in front of it and turned to with worried eyes. Please don't be scared, she said. They look strange at first, but they're harmless. They're just bobbies. She opened the door. The closet was dark except for the soft glow of a small emergency light that had installed. As the door opened wider, saw shapes moving in the shadows. Then, slowly, 6 pairs of eyes began to glow. They were large and round, reflecting the light like mirrors. The eyes floated in the darkness, all turned toward the 2 humans standing in the doorway. Felt her breath catch in her throat. For one moment, ancient fears rose up inside her. The darkness, the glowing eyes, the unknown, every instinct told her to run. Then stepped forward, and the creatures came out of hiding. They were unlike anything had ever seen. Each one was about the size of a large cat, with 4 short legs and a body covered in thick fur. But the fur was not a normal color. It shifted and changed as the creatures moved, trying to match the colors around them. In the shadows, they looked gray and dark. When one of them walked into the light, its fur turned pale white before settling into a soft brown. Their faces were almost comical, with flat noses and wide mouths that seemed to smile. Their ears were large and round, turning toward sounds like satellite dishes. And those eyes, enormous and beautiful, reflected emotions that recognized immediately: curiosity, hope, trust. "Hello, little ones," said softly, kneeling down. "I brought a friend to meet you." The cubs gathered around, pressing against her legs and making soft chirping sounds. Then, as if following some silent signal, they formed a line behind her, each one standing in the same position, each one perfectly still. They looked like soldiers waiting for orders. "That's remarkable," whispered. "They formed a line just like in the sensor readings." Smiled despite her worry. "They do this every time I stand up. I think it's how they followed their mother in the wild. She would walk and they would march behind her, stepping exactly when she stepped. It helped them stay together in the fog." Knelt down slowly, trying not to scare the cubs. One of them, slightly smaller than the others, broke formation and waddled toward her. It sniffed her hand, its wet nose cold against her skin. Then it made a happy chirping sound and pressed its head against her palm. "They're amazing," breathed. She looked up with wonder in her eyes. "Do you have any idea what you found? These creatures have adaptive camouflage more advanced than anything in our databases. Their social behavior suggests high intelligence, and their ability to synchronize movement. I've never seen anything like it." "I know they're special," said. "That's why I was afraid to tell anyone. I didn't want them to be treated like laboratory specimens. They've already lost their mother. I couldn't stand the thought of them being locked in cages and studied like objects." Stood up, her mind made up. "We need to tell the captain, tonight." His face went pale. "Please, can't we just wait a little longer? Maybe I can find a way to release them back on the moon safely, and no one ever has to know." "Listen to me," took her friend's hands and looked into her eyes. "The whole crew is terrified. They think there are monsters on the ship. Security teams are working themselves to exhaustion. People are scared to sleep. We can't let this continue." "But what will happen to the cubs?" "I don't know," admitted. "But I'll do everything in my power to protect them. And I think you underestimate Captain Cole. She's strict, but she's also fair. When she sees these little ones marching around like a tiny parade, I don't think she'll have the heart to hurt them." Looked back at the cubs. They had reformed their line behind her, waiting patiently for her next move. Their big eyes watched her with complete trust. They had no idea that their fate was about to be decided by strangers. "Okay," said finally. "We'll tell the captain, but I want to be there when we do. I want her to see how gentle they are." Nodded. "We'll do it together. Come on, let's contact the bridge." An hour later, Captain Cole stood outside Storage B7, surrounded by her senior officers. Had his hand on his weapon, ready for anything. Price held a sensor device, scanning for danger. Victor Hayes stood near the back, his large frame blocking the corridor in case something tried to escape. "This is what you wanted to show me?" Captain Cole asked, her voice neutral. You've been hiding the invisible stalkers in a storage closet. Stepped forward. They're not stalkers, Captain. They're just bobbies. Please let me show you. She opened the door. The cubs had been sleeping when they heard the voices outside. Now they were awake and scared, huddled together in the corner of the closet. Their fur had turned dark gray, trying to blend into the shadows. Their eyes were wide with fear. "It's okay," said softly, stepping into the closet. "These are friends. They won't hurt you." Slowly the cubs began to relax. They recognized his voice, and her presence calmed them. One by one, they came out of the corner and gathered around her feet. When she stood still, they formed their line behind her, 6 small creatures standing at attention. Captain Cole stared at the sight before her. Whatever she had been expecting, it was not this. Not 6 fluffy creatures with big eyes and color-changing fur, standing in a perfect row like they were waiting for inspection. "Those are the invisible stalkers," Victor Hayes said, surprise clear in his voice. "They're adorable." "They're alien of unknown capability," countered, but even his voice had softened slightly. "We don't know what they're capable of." "I know exactly what they're capable of," said. "They're capable of eating protein paste, sleeping in a warm pile, and following me around the ship. That's it. That's the full extent of their dangerous abilities." One of the cubs broke formation and waddled toward Captain Cole. It stopped at her feet and looked up with those enormous glowing eyes. Then it made a small chirping sound, almost like a question. Despite herself, the captain felt something warm stir in her chest. She had spent the past 2 days imagining horrible alien creatures prowling through her ship. She had been ready for monsters, for danger, for a fight. She had not been ready for this. "How long," she asked, her voice quiet, "how long have you been hiding them?" 5 days, admitted. "Since the surface expedition. I found them in a cave. Their mother was dead and they were alone. I couldn't leave them behind, Captain. I know I broke the rules. I know I should have reported it. But when I looked at those bobbies crying over their mother's body, all I could think about was how scared they must be, how alone they must feel." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm sorry for the confusion I caused. I'm sorry for scaring the crew. But I'm not sorry for saving their lives. I would do it again in a heartbeat." The closet fell silent. Everyone waited for the captain's decision. Cole looked down at the cub still sitting at her feet. It had started purring, a soft rumbling sound that vibrated through the air. Its fur had changed color again, now a warm golden brown that seemed to glow in the dim light. Slowly, carefully, the captain reached down and touched its head. The fur was softer than anything she had ever felt. The cub pushed against her hand happily, its purring growing louder. And in that moment, Captain Cole made her decision. "Doctor," she said, straightening up, "these creatures are now officially under your care. I want a full study of their biology, behavior, and needs. Nothing invasive, nothing harmful. Treat them as what they are. Refugees who found shelter on our ship." She turned to, "And you, engineer, will assist Doctor in their care. Since they've clearly chosen you as their guardian, you might as well make it official." His face lit up with relief and joy. "Thank you, Captain. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," the captain said, but there was a hint of warmth in her voice. "You still have to explain to 60 crew members why they've been losing sleep over 6 fluffy bobbies. I suggest you start practicing your apology." News spread through the horizon's edge like fire through dry grass. Within hours, everyone on the ship knew the truth about the invisible stalkers. The dangerous alien predators that had kept them awake for 2 days were actually 6 orphaned cubs who liked to walk in a line behind the ship's engineer. At first, many crew members were angry. They had been terrified for nothing. They had jumped at shadows and lost sleep over creatures that were no more dangerous than puppies. Some of them wanted to face serious punishment for hiding the aliens and causing so much trouble. But then they saw the cubs. Doctor had moved the creatures to a larger room near the xenobiology lab. She set up cameras to observe their behavior, and created a comfortable space for them with soft bedding and warm lights. When crew members came to see the invisible stalkers for themselves, they found 6 fluffy creatures with big eyes and color-changing fur, all sitting in a neat row and chirping happily at visitors. The anger did not last long. "They're so cute," said Lisa Morgan, one of the ship's nurses, as she watched the cubs through the observation window. "Look at how they all sit the same way, like little soldiers." "The synchronized behavior is fascinating," explained. She had become the unofficial tour guide for curious crew members. "Based on my observations, I believe it's a survival adaptation. On their home moon, the terrain is rocky and covered in thick fog. By staying in a tight formation and moving together, the cubs could follow their mother without getting lost." "What do you call them?" Lisa asked. Smiled. "We haven't given them an official species name yet, but calls them the little marchers because of how they walk in a line. The name seems to be sticking." Spent most of her free time with the cubs now. She did not have to hide anymore, and the relief she felt was overwhelming. She could sit with them openly, feed them without fear, and watch them play without worrying about being discovered. The cubs had different personalities, she noticed. The largest one, who she called Big Guy, was calm and patient, always watching over the others. The smallest one, Little Bit, was curious and adventurous, always trying to explore new areas. There were 2 cubs who stayed close together at all times and named them the twins. One cub had a patch of darker fur on its face, so she called it Patches. And the last one, who made more noise than all the others combined, she named Chirpy. Captain Cole allowed to bring the cubs to different parts of the ship during her work shifts. They still followed her everywhere, marching in their perfect line, and their presence seemed to brighten the mood wherever they went. Crew members who had been stressed and exhausted began to smile again. Some of them brought treats for the cubs, experimenting with different foods to see what they liked. "It's amazing," Price said to one day in the cafeteria. 2 days ago, everyone was terrified. Now people are arguing about which cub is the—" Shook his head, but he was smiling too. "I've been in the military for 20 years. I've seen combat situations, emergency evacuations, life-threatening scenarios. But I've never seen anything break tension faster than a bunch of fluffy aliens walking in a parade." The cubs were changing the ship in ways no one had expected. Doctor noticed that crew morale had increased significantly since the discovery. People laughed more. They talked to each other about something other than work. They found excuses to visit the xenobiology section, just to watch the little marchers play. "I've studied alien for 15 years, wrote in her research notes. "But I've never encountered creatures with this effect on humans. There's something about them that triggers our protective instincts. When we look at them, we see innocence and trust. We see creatures who need our help, and somehow, helping them makes us feel better about ourselves." 2 weeks passed. The Horizon's Edge continued its mission around 7, but now the crew had something new to care about. The cubs grew stronger and healthier under attention. Their fur became shinier, their eyes brighter, their chirping louder. They learned to recognize different crew members and reacted with excitement when certain people entered the room. Big Guy liked Victor Hayes, probably because Victor always brought him extra food. Little Bit had become attached to Price, following the sensor technician around whenever she got the chance. The twins preferred to stay with, never straying far from her side. Patches had surprisingly chosen as his favorite human, which embarrassed the tough security officer more than he would admit. And Chirpy loved everyone equally, making happy noises at whoever paid attention to him. "We need to think about the future," Captain Cole said during a senior staff meeting. "Our mission at 7 ends in 3 weeks. What happens to the cubs when we leave?" The room fell silent. It was a question no one wanted to answer. "We could release them back on the moon," Victor suggested. "Return them to their natural habitat." Shook her head. "They're too young to survive on their own. Without a mother to teach them how to hunt and find shelter, they would die within days. Their camouflage abilities are impressive, but they're not fully developed yet. Predators would find them easily. Then we take them with us, said firmly. We bring them back to Earth, or to a research station where they can be studied and protected. That's not a simple decision, Captain Cole replied. There are laws about transporting alien, quarantine requirements, safety protocols. The paperwork alone could take months. So we do the paperwork, said. We follow the protocols. We do whatever it takes. These cubs didn't ask to be orphaned. They didn't ask to be brought onto our ship, but they're here now and we're responsible for them. Spoke up, his voice thoughtful. In my experience, rules exist for good reasons, but sometimes the right thing to do isn't the same as the easy thing to do. These creatures are clearly not a threat to us or anyone else. They've done nothing but bring this crew together. I say we fight for them. One by one, the other officers nodded in agreement. Victor, even the captain herself seemed moved by their unity. All right, Cole said finally. I'll contact headquarters and explain the situation. I'll argue for an exemption for special consideration for whatever it takes, but I want everyone to understand something. She looked around the table with serious eyes. If they say no, we have to accept that decision. We can't keep these creatures forever without proper authorization. Agreed. Everyone agreed, though the worry in their eyes was clear. That night sat alone in the observation room, watching the cubs sleep. They were piled together as always, their fur shifting colors gently as they dreamed. Little Bit had somehow ended up at the bottom of the pile, but she did not seem to mind. Chirpy was making soft sounds in his sleep, probably dreaming about food. I don't know what's going to happen, whispered to them. I don't know if they'll let you stay with us, but I promise you this. No matter what happens, I will never abandon you. I will fight for you until the very end. Big Guy opened one eye and looked at her. Then he yawned, showing tiny teeth, and went back to sleep. Smiled despite her tears. These creatures had come into her life by accident, through a moment of compassion that she could not explain. But now they were part of her family, and she would do anything to keep them safe. She stayed with them until morning, watching over them like a mother guarding her young. 3 weeks later, the Horizon's Edge prepared to leave 7. The mission had been completed successfully. Rock samples were stored safely in the cargo hold. Data recordings filled the computer systems. Scientific observations had been documented and organized. Everything was ready for the long journey back to Earth. Everything except the question of the cubs. Captain Cole had sent her request to headquarters 2 weeks ago. She had explained the situation carefully, describing the orphaned creatures, their harmless nature, and the bond they had formed with the crew. She had included doctors' research notes, security assessments from, and personal testimonies from crew members who had interacted with the little marchers. Then she waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day checked her messages, hopping for news. Every day she was disappointed. The cubs seemed to sense her anxiety. They stayed closer to her than usual, their big eyes watching her with concern. They know something is wrong, observed one morning. They can read your emotions. When you're worried, they become worried too. I'm trying to stay calm, said, but it's hard. What if they say no? What if they order us to release the cubs back on the moon? They'll die. They're not ready to survive on their own. We won't let that happen, promised. Whatever the decision is, we'll find a way. The message came on the last day before departure. Captain Cole gathered the senior staff in the briefing room, her face unreadable. Stood at the back, her hands shaking slightly as she waited to hear their fate. I received a response from headquarters this morning, the captain said. I'll read it to you directly. She picked up her data pad and began to read. To Captain Cole, commanding officer of the Horizon's Edge. After careful consideration of your request regarding the alien discovered on 7, the Space Exploration Committee has reached a decision. Held her breath. The room was completely silent. Given the unique circumstances of this case, including the young age of the creatures, their apparent lack of harmful capabilities, and the significant scientific value they represent. The committee has approved an exemption to standard quarantine procedures. The creatures designated as little marchers may be transported to the Xenobiology Research Center on Mars, where they will receive proper care and study. Senior Engineer is hereby assigned as their primary caretaker during transport and initial settlement. This assignment is effective immediately. Captain Cole looked up from the data pad. They said yes. For a moment no one moved, then burst into tears. They said yes, she repeated, covering her face with her hands. They said yes. Oh my God, they said yes. The room erupted in celebration. Victor Hayes let out a loud cheer. Price was grinning so wide his face might split, even allowed himself a rare smile, rushed to his side and hugged her tightly. You did it, said. You saved them. We did it, corrected, wiping her eyes. We all did it together. Captain Cole waited for the noise to die down before continuing. There's more to the message. The committee was impressed by the way this crew handled the situation. They mentioned that our actions demonstrated the best qualities of human exploration, including curiosity, compassion, and cooperation. They want to use our experience as an example for other crews who may encounter unexpected alien life in the future. She set down the data pad and looked around the room at her officers. I'm proud of all of you. 2 weeks ago, we were hunting for invisible stalkers, ready for combat. Today, we're transporting 6 orphaned cubs to a new home where they'll be safe and cared for. This is what humanity is capable of when we lead with our hearts instead of our fears. The celebration continued long into the night. Crew members who had been anxious and worried now laughed and joked in the common areas. Someone brought out musical instruments, and soon there was singing and dancing. The cubs were brought out of the observation room and allowed to join the party. They waddled through the crowd, chirping happily, accepting treats from every hand that offered them. Sat in the corner, watching the scene with a full heart. Big Guy had settled beside her, his large body warm against her leg. Little Bit was exploring under the tables, fascinated by all the activity. The twins stayed close to each other as always, but even they seemed excited by the celebration. Patches had found again and was sitting in his lap, much to the security officer's embarrassment. And Chirpy was in the center of it all, making noise and enjoying every moment of attention. You know, said, sitting down beside, I've been thinking about why humans react so strongly to creatures like these. It's not just because they're cute, although that certainly helps. What do you mean? Asked. Gestured at the scene around them. Look at how happy everyone is. For the past 3 weeks, these cubs have given the crew something to care about beyond their jobs. They've given people a reason to come together, to cooperate, to hope. That's not a small thing, especially out here so far from home. Maybe that's what we needed, said softly. Not just them needing us, but us needing them too. That's exactly right. Humans are social creatures. We're built to form connections, to protect the vulnerable, to love and be loved. When we found these cubs, we didn't just save them. We gave ourselves permission to be kind, to be gentle, to care about something beyond ourselves. In a way, they saved us too. Looked down at Big Guy, who was watching her with those enormous, trusting eyes. She thought about the moment she had found them in that cave, huddled around their dead mother. She thought about the fear she had felt, the uncertainty, the overwhelming urge to protect them no matter what the cost. I think you're right, she said. We needed each other. From the very beginning, we needed each other. The party continued until the early hours of the morning. Eventually, crew members began drifting back to their quarters, tired but happy. The cubs were gathered up and returned to their room, where they immediately formed their sleeping pile. Stayed with them until they were all asleep, their color-changing fur slowly settling into peaceful shades of blue and purple. The next morning, the Horizon's Edge left orbit around 7. The engines hummed to life, and the ship turned toward the stars, beginning its long journey back toward the inner solar system. In the observation lounge, crew members gathered to watch the cold, rocky moon shrink in the distance. Stood at the window with all 6 cubs lined up behind her, marching in their perfect formation. They did not understand what was happening, but they trusted her completely. Wherever she went, they would follow. "Goodbye, 7," whispered. "Thank you for giving me my family." As the ship accelerated into the void, Captain Cole made a final entry in the mission log. Mission to 7 complete. All scientific objectives achieved. In addition to planned research, we are returning with 6 specimens of a previously unknown species, hereby designated marchers. These creatures, orphaned and alone, were rescued by senior engineer in an act of extraordinary compassion. What began as a crisis became an opportunity. What started as fear ended in love. This is what it means to be human. This is what we carry with us wherever we go. Not just our technology, our knowledge, our ambition, but our hearts, our capacity to care, our refusal to abandon the helpless, even when the rules tell us to walk away. Today, I am proud to be the captain of this crew, and I am proud to be human. She saved the entry and looked out the window at the stars. In the observation lounge, walked slowly around the room, 6 small creatures marching proudly behind her in perfect synchronization. They stepped when she stepped. They stopped when she stopped. And when she smiled, they chirped with joy, their fur shimmering in colors too beautiful to name. The invisible stalkers had found their home, and 66 souls, human and otherwise, sailed together through the endless dark, bound by something stronger than fear. Bound by love.